In this series of videos, I'm going to take a look at some factoring techniques. They're connected to the kind of factoring you did in the quadratic unit with a couple of other skills or techniques added in there. So this very first video, we're going to look at the simplest version of factoring, which is often called factoring using the GCF, or the greatest common factor, the GCF. And this is a great technique to use. I always check to see if there's a greatest common factor before I do any other technique because it's the easiest to use also. So I've got two problems here. 4x squared minus 16x and 3x cubed y plus 9y squared y. Sorry, 9x squared y minus 12x squared y squared, and I'm going to factor both of these polynomials using their greatest common factor. So step one in any of these problems is to figure out what that GCF is. So I need to find the GCF. And I do that by looking at both terms and asking myself what divides in evenly into both terms. So if I'm looking at 4x squared and 16x, they both have factors that are divisible by 4. So part of my GCF is going to be a 4. But I also notice that both of these terms have an x. So I know they're going to have, the GCF is going to have an x. The last step that I need to take in writing my GCF is deciding, well, what exponent do I use? And I always use the lowest exponent that is shown. So in this case, it's a 1. So I'll just write my GCF as 4x. All right, step 2. Once I have my GCF, I'm going to divide the GCF out of my polynomial and rewrite. So 4x, parentheses, and then I say to myself, well, 4x goes into 4x squared how many times? This is what I'm saying. 4x squared divided by 4x gives me what for an answer? Well, 4 would go into 4 once, and x squared divided by x would just be an x. So 4x squared divided by 4x is just x. Now I'll do the same thing with the second term, negative 16x. Divide that by my greatest common factor, 4x. Negative 16 divided by 4 is negative 4. X divided by x is just 1. They cancel. So negative 16x divided by 4x is x minus 4. And there I have it. I've factored using the greatest common factor. Let's do the same process again with my second polynomial. So step 1 is going to be to decide what number goes into 3x cubed y, 9x squared y, and 12x squared y squared. And what goes into 3, 9, and 12 is 3. So I know that my greatest common factor has at least a 3 in it. So my greatest common factor has a 3. Now I need to look at my x terms. Do they all have x's? Let's see. Yep, they all have x's, so my greatest common factor has an x. I choose the exponent by choosing the lowest power of x, so that would be a squared. So it becomes 3x squared. Now I need my y's. Do they all have a y? Yes, they all have a y, so my greatest common factor has a y. And now I choose the lowest power of y, which is a 1. So my greatest common factor is 3x squared y, and I can write that y to the first power, or I can just leave it blank. Now, next step, once I have my greatest common factor, is to divide it out of each of my terms. So I write 3x squared y outside the parentheses, and I'm going to divide out each of them. So 3x cubed y squared divided by 3x squared y, I am left with just 1x. Next one, 9x squared y divided by 3x squared y, and I have just a 3 plus 3, right? The x squares are going to cancel, the y squares are going to cancel, I'll have just the 9. And then 3x squared y divided by, or divided into, sorry, 12x squared y squared is going to be 4. So minus 4. The x squares canceled. Y squared divided by y is just y. So here is my answer. Factored using the greatest common factor. Okay, in the next video, I will take a look at another technique. There will be these videos to watch all together.